Every week, millions of people move home, and as it's one of the most stressful things that you'll do in life, you need to get it right. I'm Rebecca Jane, and together with the region's best property experts, we'll be giving you some top tips and expert advice, shining a spotlight on a different area from across the Midlands, and getting to know a little more about our guests and what they look for in a home. Property is ever evolving and always a fascinating subject. We'll guide you on what you need to know and what you need to look out for here on Midlands at Home. On this week's show, we'll be taking a look at the conveyancing side of selling your home, how to prepare your home to sell, discussing various tricky issues that can arise and how to avoid them, and giving you lots of useful tips to help make the process of moving home a little bit more straightforward. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? My guest today is Andrew Davis from MFG Solicitors. Andrew, welcome to the show. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about your background in the industry and how you started.
Well, I've always been in residential property. I started back at the end of the 80s with a Black Country firm. Spent a bit of time in Birmingham with the city centre firm, and the past 12 years or so I've been with MFG Solicitors in their Telford office. And I've been head of the residential property teams with MFG for the past 3 or so years now. And
it covers quite a big area, doesn't it?
It does. We've got offices throughout Worcestershire, Kidderminster, Bromsgrove. We've got offices in Telford, Ludlow as well, and Worcester, of course.
Lovely big patch.
We have,
Our
yes.
patch here at Big Centre, which is great. Now, it's an area that we haven't actually discussed yet on the show, and yet I think it's an area we tend to overlook. We don't think about the conveyancing side. We're so busy wrapped up in how do we get the house ready to go onto the market, then of course we get the offer, then it's if we're purchasing, so it's an area that we don't tend to think about, and yet it's so important.
Well, I think you've gone straight to the crux of the matter there, that really we think about, or buyers think about solicitors lastly rather than at the start, and I think when you're looking for solicitors you should be considering that point right at the outset. So whether you're buying or selling, that should be your first port of call really after getting the property onto the market. Reason for that is simply preparation, speaking to your solicitors, your conveyancers, making certain that you're aware of the things that will need to be provided for them to progress the transaction proactively for you and to make it as smooth and as stress-free as possible.
Yeah, I mean, preparation is in everything really. It is key, because then it just makes it, as you said, nice and smooth and nice and straightforward.
Absolutely.
So what's your advice then to sellers? If you're thinking of perhaps putting your house on the market, if you've already got your house on the market and you're thinking, oh, actually, good point, need to sort out my conveyancers, what would be your advice?
Well, speak to your conveyancer, go through the kind of information and paperwork they'll need from you. They should guide you as to the information that a buyer will need, and that's the perspective you need to look at it from when you're selling your property. Well, what would a buyer want? What would I want if I was buying a property? And from there, get together all the paperwork that you've got, get together your paper trail, and also they'll help you identify areas that you've not thought about, where there might be gaps in your paperwork and issues that could affect your sale, and what you need to do to put those right. And I think doing that at the outset is key, because then it can reduce delays and remove issues that can arise later that really you don't want to have to deal with.
Exactly, that's it. You want it as hassle-free as possible.
Absolutely.
Now, there's two different types of conveyances. You've got the solicitor route, as you are, and then you've got the other form. Can you just break it down for us a little bit?
Well, generally you've got solicitors firms, such as MFG, and then you've got licensed conveyancer firms. Licensed conveyancer firms do what they say on the tin, basically, and that's the conveyancing work. The difference is with solicitors that we have so many more services that we can add on to that, and when you're buying or selling property, there's large amounts of money involved. There are other things to consider than just the house sale, whether it be you're making a will, tax planning, if you're buying or selling property with a partner, how you deal with your interests in that property and those assets. So you can look at cohabitation agreements and prenuptial agreements as well. So there's a whole raft of issues that can stem from the house transaction itself.
It's a good opportunity to kind of get everything sorted, isn't it? So like you said, if you haven't done your will, or if you haven't thought about another issue, it's kind of a good time to think, right, I'm going to tick all those boxes.
It's an excellent time to do it. And what we find is that people tend to try and put these things off, or we'll get back to you about making a will, we'll do this later, but it's really important that people consider all these factors together and actually do something about them to avoid problems later.
And you must see all sorts, talking about problems, you must see all sorts of problems. What do you come across? What sort of mistakes are there that you see on a perhaps daily basis?
The mistakes that people tend to make is this lack of preparation, that they've not kept paperwork that really would be needed.
We like to avoid it, but we can't.
Exactly, or they've cut corners in the past. And to be fair to them, they've not considered the fact they're going to be selling the property in a number of years' time and might not have thought it's important. But I think one of the points I'd like to make is that these things are important, because if you do come to sell, you're going to need these bits of paper and make certain you've ticked all the right boxes.
And if you've, for example, say you had a wall taken down, and you needed the relevant paperwork, and you think, oh, well, I did have it, I can't put my hand on it, can you get another copy?
Yes, most local authorities these days will allow you to download free of charge copies of past planning permissions.
Oh, that's good.
And building regulation approvals. Some authorities do still charge to provide those, but generally it's not huge amounts of money. So as part of the conversations with your conveyancer at the outset, these points will come up, and if you've not got the paperwork but you've had it signed off properly, then that's the point to check on the website with the council, download copies, or if you can't download them, go to council offices and purchase another copy.
Because you can just feel it's just an awful lot of paperwork, and when you need a certificate for this or a certificate for that, and you think, well, but boxes everywhere, I don't quite know it. So that's peace of mind to know that you can just get another copy. That's
yes,
great.
And likewise with certificates for heating installations, electrics, etc.
Boilers, yeah.
Generally, you can get copies of those certificates as well. So there's no need to worry if you can't find it. If you know you had it but you can't, then you can get copies.
And what's the biggest mistake, or one of the biggest mistakes that you might have seen over the years?
The biggest mistake in terms of cost to the seller was cutting corners on an extension. A pretty big extension. It cost them a lot of money a number of years ago. They got the correct planning permission and building regulation approvals for the work, but when the work had been done, they'd not got it signed off. When you get it signed off by building control, they'll issue a completion certificate, and that's proof to anyone then that the work's been done in the right manner. It's compliant.
Yes.
Years went by. Decided to sell the property. The buyer wasn't happy, or on the advice of their surveyor, wanted building control to come back out to view it. Building control did that. It wasn't up to standard. It cost them well over £10,000 to put right what was wrong. They lost the particular buyer they got, and it took them about another 6 months to find another buyer.
Oh, it's just not worth it, is it?
No, and their explanation was, well, we thought it had been done okay, so that was fine. If they'd have done it properly at the time, if there had been any issues, the builder would have been on hand to put them right.
Of course.
But that builder had gone out of business a number of years later, and it cost them a lot of money and a lot of stress.
Oh gosh, I mean, even if you're not moving home, if you're thinking of an extension, it's really, really important to go about it, in the right route. So perhaps you're not moving home, and you do want to do that extension. What's the right sort of avenue, if you like, that you need to go down in order to get it approved?
Just ensure that you've got the appropriate approvals in the first place, and when the work's completed, make certain that you get it signed off by building control and keep that document. So you can get copies if you lose it in the future, but if you've not got it in the first place, that's when the problems can arise. Yeah,
there was a story, wasn't there, in the papers, I don't know whether you saw it last week, about this chap that had just built and built and built and just hoping that kind of brush it under the carpet, no one will know, and then he's got done for and told to take down, certain parts of the building. Can that happen as well?
It can, and that's why it's such a false economy to try and cut corners and avoid the final bits of paperwork. So
it's just not worth it.
It's not worth it, no.
What other issues can we see that may arise, and how can we possibly avoid them?
Other issues that can arise would be whether restrictions on people's title as to things they can and can't do with their property.
Right.
It might be that you need consent of an adjacent landowner or a government department or the local authority itself for doing work to the exterior of your property. And that's aside from building regulations or planning permission. So it's always worth just looking at your title documents as well to make certain that what you're intending to do isn't restricted in some other way, or you don't need the consent of another person before carrying out that work.
Yeah, I suppose the beauty of using someone like yourself is that, as you said, you cover lots of different fields. So if you come across various problems or various issues, I know that I'm moving house at the moment, and the house that I really like, it's got a field at the back. And I'm thinking, well, that's great, but what if there was a developer that came along? You can take care of everything. Well,
we've got specialists in various areas. So if, as you mentioned, you're looking at buying a field or you're surrounded by fields, we've got a specialist agricultural team that can look into agricultural issues for you, the use of the land. We can advise then on trusts, tax planning for larger properties and larger estates. So it's really been able to service people's whole needs under one roof.
And that's it, because you do hear those stories, don't you, that, you know, somebody's bought a lovely house and they've got a view of the countryside, view of the field, and then your worst nightmare comes along where a developer comes along and builds all on the back. And
absolutely,
horrendous.
Yeah. It's about looking at the bigger picture, looking at the title of the land that surrounds you, making inquiries to the local authority as to any development proposals that there may be. Your conveyancers can make a planning search to that effect as well. And I think it's just thinking about your future intentions and what will impact upon your enjoyment of your property if you're buying one, if the reason you're buying it is that beautiful view of the English countryside behind you.
Yes, definitely. Well, don't go anywhere. You're with us after the break, aren't you?
I am.
We're going to be looking at electrics, extensions and a lot more. See you in a few minutes. This week's spotlight area is Shirley. Shirley is a suburb of Solihull. The area grew rapidly in the late 19th century and early 20th century as people moved out of Birmingham, helped by the opening of the railway in 1908 as a Great Western route from Snow Hill Station to Stratford-upon-Avon and on to Cheltenham. There are many shops and businesses in Shirley, many located along the Stratford Road. There is a high proportion of independent retailers and many restaurants and other eateries too, so you're never stuck for choice. There are also many well-known supermarkets in Shirley and lots of plans for development in the area too. Shirley is in a prime location, close to transport links and with lots of amenities on its doorstep too. So, needless to say, property in the area comes with a bit of a price tag. But then, location always commands a premium. It certainly does. Now, we've been discussing today conveyancing when it comes to selling your home. Andrew, thank you for joining us from MFG Solicitors. You must come across all sorts of things on a daily basis. I suppose there's never a dull moment with your job.
No, because the involvement of people, and that's part of the pleasure of the job actually, is that you get to meet and speak to so many different people as well. So.
Yeah. Do you find that different eras of property, there's different problems and different complications? You know, you come across a certain case and you think, right, it's because it's the 1960s, or you know, it's because it's a Georgian house or whatever. Is that the case?
It is. I mean, certainly the older the property is, the more likely there is to be issues, simply because there's been that many changes of ownership over the years.
Right.
People don't know what might have been done in the past. Whether the work's been properly signed off, because the local authority records might not go back that far, and that tends to raise these issues. Also, it's not just the era of the property, it can be location as well. So rural properties also bring with their own special problems and pleasures. Private drainage, private water supplies, rights of access, and they can be affected by public footpaths. All kinds of different issues that will affect them because of their location in the countryside. So
does that just take a little bit more time if there is an adopted road, or if there is a septic tank or something like that? It takes a little bit more time just to delve a bit deeper and to get all the
Indeed, have to look at that a little bit deeper,
yeah,
to make certain that the appropriate rights are in place, that people can get to and from their property, and that with the services such as the drainage and the water, that supply is safe for the future, that they're not going to suddenly get cut off and
that's
have
it.
That kind of problem.
Yeah, and that's the beauty really of using someone like yourselves, is that you are able to go through the whole process, and we trust, don't we? We need to have that trust there, that
Absolutely.
good relationship that can kind of go through the whole process, and if there's an issue, it's not just forgotten about or just brushed under the carpet. You have to look at every single aspect.
That's right, yes. So, and that's why, as I said earlier, about speaking to your solicitors, your conveyancers, right at the start, so that these kind of issues can be considered, and where there is a problem, a resolution can be found, so that when a buyer comes to the table, we can present them with a fait accompli, a solution to the problem.
Yeah, and it is having solutions, because I think my friend came across asbestos in a property and was actually advised from her solicitor to just withdraw from the sale. And it is having that trust. I mean, can you overcome something like asbestos if it comes up in a report?
Well, what I would suggest there is that specialist reports are then obtained, because with asbestos generally, if it's not disturbed, then it's not a problem.
Okay.
But if people that are buying a property are maybe looking at making alterations to it, it's going to be disturbed then. Often you'll find sort of 1950s and earlier properties have garages with corrugated asbestos roofs.
Right.
And if people want to replace the roof, they might have a concern there. But if you use a licensed contractor to deal with the asbestos, it's not that expensive. So I think from the seller's perspective, when this comes up, it's getting those estimates prepared for them and to see what the cost might be, and then that can come into negotiation on price if needs be. So it's not necessarily a full stop with the transaction going ahead. There are further things that can be looked at and done to.
It's having trust, isn't it? Because you are trusting that solicitor, you know, and if you've got, say, somebody who's a bit elderly and they've got no family around and they are just relying purely on the advice, it's crucial that we get the right one. So how do we spot a good conveyancer?
Well, I would suggest that when you're looking for a firm to act on your behalf, if they're solicitors, it should be accredited under the Law Society's Conveyancing Quality Scheme. That's effectively a kite mark, a guarantee to you that that firm adheres to certain protocols and criteria, that they'll be proactive in how they move the matter forward for you and really have your best interests at heart in achieving that. Also, I think with the solicitor, it's having that trust, that conversation with them, and you'll get a feel then for whether you feel, you know, they're going to do the best job they can for you. And also as recommendation from family and friends as well that have used conveyancers in the past. So
that always helps, doesn't it? Peace of mind.
Yes,
of course. Now, we only discussed briefly before the break about various things like electrics and boilers and extensions. So let's start off with electrics, first of all, in terms of what we need to do, certificates and so forth.
Well, if you're selling your property and your electrics haven't been checked for some time, then I would advise getting them checked out. If there's a clean bill of health for them, you've got a bit of paperwork that you can present then to your buyer. If there are issues, then for your own safety, you'd want to know this anyway, but it means that, again, you can get the repairs done in advance. If you're having any electrical work done, might be in a kitchen or a bathroom or outside, very important that the contractor you use is registered with the appropriate regulatory body. Check that they are, you can check with the regulator, and that they're going to register that work with them when it's complete. Because when they do that, you'll then get a certificate that shows that the work is compliant with building regulations, which again is crucial to present to the purchaser of the property. And
what about boilers? Get your boiler serviced, would you advise?
Certainly advise getting your boiler serviced. Again, it gives that clean bit of health you can present for a buyer's peace of mind. And if there are problems, again, your own safety, and get the repairs done if it needs repair. Again, if you're having a boiler installed, whether you think about selling or not, make certain that the contractor is properly registered. Never do gas work yourself, for example. And that you're going to get that certificate, that gas safe certificate that shows that the work is compliant under what's called the competent person scheme, which is self-certification for these contractors under the building regulations.
And we're more energy efficient now as well. I mean, we see new homes and we see, you know, various things put into place. Solar panels, for example. How does that work?
Well, solar panels, there are two scenarios. One where the homeowner owns the solar panels themselves outright. They create their own energy, and then they might get a feed-in payment as well from the energy supplier for the excess that goes into the grid. The alternative scenario is where the installer of the panels retains ownership of the panels and then takes a lease of your roof space. Now, if they're going to do that, make certain you get the lease checked out by your solicitors and conveyancers. Check with your mortgage lender, if you have a lender, that the lease is compliant with their requirements and they agree to it being registered against your title as well. Make certain the installer is properly regulated, as with your electrics and your gas, and that you get the appropriate certification to show that the installation is compliant with the building regulations as well.
Yeah, it is. It's all certificates as well. And the issue that we've got to talk about, we can't avoid it, although we'd like to, cost. So obviously, you know, there are fees attached. Again, can you talk us through a little bit to do with cost?
Well, I would say to people, don't make cost your primary motive for choosing your conveyancer. And the reason I would say that is that, yes, you can go online and see lots of headline adverts for conveyancing at really, really cheap prices. At the end of the day, you're dealing with an asset that might be worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. And to me, it seems silly to skimp on the legal costs.
Yes,
For
you get what you pay for generally now, don't you?
Exactly. So service is the most important thing, getting the job done, getting the completion done as smoothly and as stress-free as possible. And if that means you're paying that little bit more, then I think that's money well invested because you're paying for a service, and as you say, you get what you pay for in life.
You do. And I think you get a gut feeling, don't you? I certainly do. From speaking to someone, you get that gut feeling of, actually, I want to go with that person, and maybe cost isn't the the top.
Well, when you speak to the solicitor at the outset, it's having those conversations. Yes, you're going to ask them what it's going to cost, but I wouldn't make that your first question. It's getting a feel for that person. Are they interested in what you're saying to them? Will it be them that's doing the work for you, or will you just be shunted down the line? It's that trust issue, and put that before cost, really.
Definitely. You can't avoid the paperwork. I know from moving recently, I remember the pack came through the post, it was 27 pages. I thought, wow, gosh, so much paperwork.
There is a lot of paperwork at the outset especially, but I think if you're selling a property, look at it from the buyer's perspective. What would you want to know about a house if you were buying it? And there's a lot of paperwork because there are some really important questions and bits of information in that people need to know. So
definitely. And finally, what would be your top tips for selling your home?
Top tip, preparation. Get things checked out, get your paperwork out, go through it, tick all the boxes. If there is an issue, don't bury your head in the sand. Speak to people as to how to resolve it. Get it resolved, because if you resolve it yourself at the outset, it can only help reduce delays and issues that arise later, and to try and cut corners really is a false economy. Yeah,
that's it. I think with anything in life, it is all about the preparation, isn't it? Anything else?
Cooperate as well. If you need to answer a question, answer the question, provide the information. Because a lot of delays arise when people try and put their head in the sand and hope the problem goes away, and it doesn't go away.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you next week for more on Midlands at Home. Take care.